So, ang bilis ng panahon, no? It's been about 5 years ever since the first Corolla Cross hit the Philippine market. And ever since then, it has already outsold the Corolla Altis by nearly 10 to 1. Basically a reflection of our love for crossover SUVs. Now, for the 2025 model year, the Corolla Cross got a mid-cycle facelift. Ang tanong ngayon dyan is, are these changes enough to keep the Corolla Cross ever more competitive and of course, ever more relevant? That's exactly what we're gonna be finding out in this car's full review. So as a reminder, here are the aesthetic changes that Toyota made for its mid-cycle facelift. So it basically starts with this new front end, which as you're gonna see here, you now have this borderless grille which seamlessly integrates into the car's very sleek front fascia. Also now standard for this model year are full LED headlights because dati, in the base G, this variant used to have merely halogen headlights. And then, complementing this newly styled front end is a new front bumper as well. And siguro mapapansin nyo na the license plate here is green, basically as an indicator that this car is a hybrid or a fully electric vehicle. Now as for the side profile, well, actually there's nothing new here in this part except for the car's HEV badging, which now dons the new Toyota Beyond Zero Horizon logo. As for its rear fascia, again, wala pinagbago from the pre-facelift version except for its new LED taillights which were inherited from the mid-spec V. Overall, while the mostly front fascia changes are very nice, I would still somehow wish for at least new alloy wheels or perhaps even a few new color choices. But what do you think? Are these aesthetic improvements enough? Let us of course know down in the comment section. Now, with the design pretty much remaining nearly the same as before but with a more striking front end, I think that's a good time for us to step inside the new Corolla Cross to see what else this car has to offer. Now as for the interior of the new Corolla Cross Hybrid, as you're gonna see here, the design itself is pretty much unchanged. Actually, sa totoo lang, there's nothing new from an aesthetic standpoint, but once again, for this base G variant, there are actually a lot of new features, making this one of the best variants for you to choose if you basically want just the necessities, but still feeling quite modern. So being the base G, you don't get digital gauges here, pero what you get as standard na ngayon is this new 10.1-inch infotainment system. So the graphics look sharp, they're very crisp, the interface is very user-friendly. May problem nga lang is, this actually isn't the Toyota Global Infotainment. So what I mean by that is, this is actually a region-specific infotainment system, and so because of that, medyo nabawasan ka ng integration with the rest of the vehicle's functions. For example, if you want to adjust the door lock settings or even the beep settings for the smart key, well, you cannot do that, and pretty much what you've been left here is a car na you can't even operate anymore, yung kanyang speed sensing door locks. So if you're gonna be purchasing this car, just keep that function in mind with this infotainment system because there are a few in-car features that were disabled as a result of this region-specific infotainment system. Now, if you have the higher variants with the Toyota Safety Sense in the V and the GR Sport or the GRS, you can still adjust those through the car's full digital gauge cluster. Anyway, what you get here at least is Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, wireless by the way, and then you also have a wireless charging pad, and yeah, again, being the base G, there really isn't a lot of toys here in this entry-level variant, but I actually do like that you still get the niceties, basically the modern creature comforts, like for example, a reverse camera, dual zone climate control, and as you're probably seeing ngayon sa ating camera feed, yun nga, you have a dash cam at the rear windshield and also here at the front of the, basically the car's windshield. Now, apart from the tech stuff, inside the Toyota Corolla Cross, again, aesthetically, it's remained pretty much unchanged. In the GRS variant though, you now get a panoramic sunroof along with a very large full digital gauge cluster. Here in the base G, what I like about this variant is despite being the entry-level version of the Corolla Cross Hybrid, yun nga, the materials are pretty nice. You still have soft touch materials here on the doors, here on the dash, and though the design is not necessarily stylish, pero it still feels well built and with a reasonable amount of premium feel. Now, for this variant, you also have fabric seats, which are, well, may not be the best in terms of delivering a premium feel, but they do a good job of resisting heat, especially in the midday sun. With that in mind, it's a good time na ngayon for us to go to the back seats, which, as you're gonna see, in terms of legroom here at the back of the Corolla Cross Hybrid, well, it's not the worst, but it's not the best either for the subcompact crossover SUV segment. This seat, by the way, has been set for my driving position, so this basically takes into account a 5'11" driver along with the 5'11" rear passenger. So yun nga, the legroom's not the best, but good enough na for me. But headroom though is really good. Like, there's a lot of headroom in the Corolla Cross, but compared to, for example, the Honda HR-V in particular, that car actually has more legroom compared to the Toyota Corolla Cross. Nevertheless, in terms of space, it's actually pretty good na rin for the segment. The rear seats though are a bit narrow. They're a bit on the narrow side, especially for the middle passenger. So if they're gonna be sitting here, they're gonna be fighting a bit for shoulder room, but that's pretty much the case rin naman for most of the car's rivals anyway. And then, as for amenities here in the back of the Corolla Cross Hybrid, as you're gonna be seeing, yun nga, there are aircon vents here. You also have 2 cup holders and another cup holder pala on each side of the door, and 1 touch up-down windows, so that's pretty good, especially for under 1.5 million pesos. And now, with that in mind, pag-usapan naman natin ngayon yung kanyang cargo area. Once again, not the best in the segment, but still pretty good enough for what the rest of the competition offers. Now, having talked about interior feel, the tech, as well as the practicality, I think that's a good time for us to talk about the drivetrain as well as the car's driving experience. Now, one of the biggest highlights of this mid-cycle facelift is the fact that the hybrid powertrain is now standard across all 3 variants. Though it is new for the G variant, the 1.8-liter hybrid system receives no mechanical changes for this mid-cycle facelift. Nevertheless, as you will soon realize, it is indeed this base G variant that truly becomes a better car leaps and bounds thanks to the hybrid drivetrain now being a standard feature. Now, as for the driving experience of the Toyota Corolla Cross Hybrid, as you're probably gonna notice, all variants na ngayon of the Toyota Corolla Cross have a hybrid powertrain, thus making this one of Toyota's frontrunners in their ever-growing hybrid lineup. Now, with the Corolla Cross Hybrid, actually sa totoo lang, there's no mechanical changes. And so therefore, in terms of the driving feel, in terms of the way it performs, it is still pretty much the same as the pre-facelift version. Not necessarily a bad thing, because this hybrid system, which by the way uses a planetary gear eCVT compared to Honda's sportier clutch-based system, it means na this hybrid system is very responsive, very snappy with your inputs in the throttle. And so as a result of that, if we're going to be exiting through this corner, for example, it's very responsive to your inputs as a result of that. And especially with the electric motor, which basically fills up the power band gap of this gas engine, ang resulta nun basically is this hybrid system feels very responsive. Yun nga lang, because of that planetary gear eCVT system, we're gonna be going up to an incline here. It's really gonna hold the revs for the entire time that you're gonna be in the throttle. So, not necessarily the most sporty sensation because of that rubber band dynamic, that rubber band feel, but for efficiency, that is actually the most appropriate for the Toyota Corolla Cross Hybrid. So, intersections, and then as in it's really droning the engine a lot here. But yun nga, for the most part, from the inside naman, from how you feel it behind the wheel, the hybrid drivetrain is pretty smooth. Though there's a bit of vibrations from the gas engine, but it's actually not too bad naman. Hindi naman siya kasing coarse, for example, nung sa Toyota Yaris Cross Hybrid. And so here kasi in the Corolla Cross, the vibrations from the engine are actually much better dampened. So here, another incline. It's holding the rev, basically ang tirik ng araw. Pero yun nga, it's holding the rev, no fake gear changes, no linear shift control whatsoever that you would see, for example, in the Honda system. So yun nga, the Honda's hybrid system is actually the sportier one, Also somewhat the more refined one because there's no engine droning from their hybrid powertrain. But of course, the best use case scenario for Toyota's hybrid system is whenever you use this car in the city because, yun nga, the strong enough electric motors rather, are there to help you propel for as much as possible in pure electric mode. Now, as for the rest of the driving experience, the Toyota Corolla Cross is again unchanged nga from a suspension and chassis perspective. And so as a result of that, the Corolla Cross remains to be very compliant, very easy to live with. And sa totoo lang, having driven so much sporty cars over the past few months, it's actually quite refreshing to once again go back to the Toyota Corolla Cross Hybrid because let's be honest though, the Corolla Cross is not exactly an exciting car. Hindi naman siya sobrang sporty, hindi naman siya yung one of those cars with stiff suspension for example, that helps in mitigating body roll. But ang resulta niyan is, for example, especially with its supple suspension, it's actually a very relaxing car to drive, especially if you're gonna be cruising in daily city traffic. So the steering is, yun nga, it's actually pretty light, not Chinese car-like, thankfully, but light enough for a lot of people to appreciate how easy to drive the Corolla Cross is, while still having a bit of heft for it to not feel too cumbersome in the daily grind. There's also a reasonable amount of response with the steering of the Corolla Cross Hybrid, but you're really not gonna be thinking of this car as sporty because there's not a lot of feedback going to the steering wheel of the Corolla Cross Hybrid, and like the suspension, which is more on the supple side of things, it delivers a pretty good ride, but in terms of body control, again, it's pretty good in terms of that aspect, but this is basically what the normal customers want. Basically, those who just want to go from A to B in relative comfort and ease. Actually, sa totoo lang, especially since I've driven recently lang the Mitsubishi X-Force, I actually prefer pa nga the ride quality of this car. Though the Honda HR-V, depending on which variant you're talking about, the ride of the Corolla Cross is either on par with the Honda HR-V, or if you're talking about the HR-V RS, I think that car actually has the better ride quality compared to the Corolla Cross. So, having mentioned suspension, the GRS, by the way, the GR Sport variant, actually gets a slightly sportier tune, and that is actually the variant that I reviewed from the pre-facelift version. To be honest, now that I'm driving the base G, from a handling perspective, hindi ko pansin yung difference, if I were being honest, nung stiffer-ish suspension ng Corolla Cross GRS. But yun nga, body control's good enough naman for the car to still feel stable enough with a reasonable amount of agility and, of course, ride comfort. Talagang, yun nga, it's a perfect everyday car for driving in the daily city grind. Now, finally, out here on the highway, itong Toyota Corolla Cross Hybrid. Again, yun nga, it's still unchanged pa rin from the pre-facelift version. And so, what you get in this driving scenario is a car that feels relatively comfortable with the suspension dealing with bumps pretty well. Yun nga lang, since medyo pa-uphill itong expressway natin ngayon, itong section ng Calax, yeah, you're hearing the engine droning the cabin somewhat. And that's the nature nga lang of the car's planetary gear type ECVT. That's unlike the Honda hybrid systems na kung saan the engine is able to mimic yung parang mga basically shift points from a traditional automatic, and so therefore the Honda system ends up being more refined and also much sportier to drive. But yun nga, once things have settled down, once you're just cruising around, the car will predominantly drive in pure electric mode kung kaya niya, and therefore that will end up giving you excellent fuel economy numbers. Speaking of which, we're currently averaging at 18.1 kilometers per liter. So, you have to remember na the best use case in a hybrid is that if you live in the city, for example, na puro traffic, puro ka lang naman gapang in EDSA, for example, that is where hybrids are actually at their most fuel efficient. That's also especially helped by the fact na, syempre, ang hybrids, they have regenerative braking, and so therefore, the batteries are always frequently topped up, which will really enable you to cruise in pure electric mode for a far higher percentage of your drive. In city traffic, this is easily able to do mga 22 kilometers per liter or more. But yun nga, once you're on the move, mas less efficient na yung mga hybrid vehicles, but still, much more efficient pa rin than a typical non-hybrid vehicle. Lastly, as for advanced driver assistance systems, yun nga lang, this being the base G variant, wala itong Toyota Safety Sense. So wala itong adaptive cruise control, lane departure warning, lane keeping assist, lane centering, blind spot warning, and all of those other advanced safety features. But you still get the fundamental features like yun nga, a reverse camera, electronic stability control, and of course, a plethora of airbags to protect you when you end up in a crash. Of course, huwag nating asahan naman, or let's not hope that that would happen to you. When you step up, however, to the mid-spec V or the range-topping GRS, that's when you finally get the Toyota Safety Sense Advanced Driver Assistance Systems. So, overall, itong Toyota Corolla Cross, especially now that you have this base G variant, finally a standard as a hybrid, that is actually helping put more Filipino customers in a hybrid electric vehicle. Yun nga lang though, it's hard to deny the fact that the Chinese are really doing so well these days, especially with regard to electrification. And yes, you've probably seen naman on the road with the BYD Lion 6, for instance, there's really a lot of them on the road, especially that they're plug-in hybrids with much more powerful electric motors and a bigger battery, and so therefore with a daily usable electric range as well. But as it stands, if you want something that's very familiar, very comfortable, along with of course the fact na since this is a normal hybrid and not a plug-in hybrid, you still don't have to think about charging with a car like this. So if you want a hybrid electric vehicle na wala ka masyadong iisipin, as in you pretty much will treat this pa rin as a normal, typical everyday gas-powered car, then the Toyota Corolla Cross will be a very perfect vehicle for you. Now, if you want to see all three variants, you can check out our first look video from last year. Still, if you already want this G variant, prices now start at a little over 1.5 million pesos. Yeah, I know, medyo tumaas actually ang presyo niya from last year. Now, if you want the mid-spec V, that variant now costs 1,789,000 pesos. Lastly, for the range-topping GRS, you will have to shell out about 1.9 million pesos, making it one of the most expensive subcompact crossover SUVs out there. Overall, with the hybrid powertrain now standard across all three variants, the Corolla Cross is putting a lot more Filipinos in a hybrid vehicle. Basically, it's a car na hindi mo masyadong pag-iisipan since you know it's gonna be reliable, durable, whilst practically feeling normal on your daily drives and offering unparalleled levels of fuel efficiency. Though again, it's hard to deny that competition from Chinese brands, particularly BYD, is getting tougher than ever.